In court, a desperate mother was called insane by her ex-husband, nearly losing her daughter forever. But just when all hope seemed lost, a shocking video played by their 6-year-old changed everything. Lies shattered, hearts broke, and justice took the spotlight. What was in that video? And why did it silence an entire courtroom? Where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that hit straight to the heart. I used to think silence meant safety. After the divorce, I moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the quieter side of town. It wasn't much: worn carpet, humming fridge, a stubborn faucet that always dripped at night, but it was ours. Just me and Lily, my daughter, 6 years old, with a laugh like wind chimes and eyes too observant for her age. She would sit cross-legged on the floor, coloring in silence while cartoons played in the background. Sometimes I'd catch her flinching when the volume spiked or when a door slammed too hard. I told myself she'd grow out of it. I told myself we both would. Ethan Blake, my ex-husband, was a man who knew how to wear charm like a designer suit. To outsiders, he was courteous, composed, generous. But at home, his voice could slice through drywall, and his anger arrived in chilling, quiet waves rather than storms. That was the thing about emotional abuse. It left no bruises, no broken bones, only a growing doubt inside you that maybe it was your fault. Maybe you were the crazy one. When we first met, I was working as an assistant curator at a local art gallery, and he was a marketing executive who spoke like he had swallowed a TED Talk. He swept me off my feet, flattered me with praise, and made me feel seen. For a while, I believed in the picture we painted together, a picture he controlled every brushstroke of. But the smiles faded quickly. The compliments turned to critiques. He'd comment on my posture at dinner, the way I chewed, the books I read. "You should try not to sound so emotional when you talk," he once told me in front of guests. "It makes people take you less seriously." I laughed along. That's what you do. You laugh when you're uncomfortable, because calling it out would just make everything worse. By the time Lily was born, I had become a master of navigating minefields. I knew which words would trigger his sarcasm, which silences meant I should be small, and which days I should pretend to be grateful for the illusion of peace. When he held our newborn daughter in his arms, I remember thinking maybe, just maybe, he would change. He didn't. He only learned how to manipulate more carefully, more surgically. After years of trying to convince myself that surviving was the same as living, I finally left. Not in some dramatic midnight escape. No, I planned it like a heist. I waited for him to be on a business trip. I packed essentials, grabbed Lily, and left a letter on the kitchen table. My hands were shaking the whole time. I didn't feel brave. I felt like I was trespassing on my own life. The first few weeks were fragile. Every knock on the door made my chest clench. Lily would sleep in my bed most nights, curled into me like she was trying to melt into my ribs. We spoke softly, like too much sound might bring him back. But slowly, tiny cracks of sunlight slipped through. I watched Lily chase pigeons in the park again. I watched her giggle at bedtime stories. I started humming to myself while washing dishes, something I hadn't done in years. We were healing. Then came the weekends. Ethan was granted shared custody. The court said he had no history of violence, no criminal record, and, worst of all, that he seemed sincerely committed to being a good father. I wanted to scream, but the law favored appearances, and Ethan had always been an expert at appearances. The first few visits were bearable. Lily came back quiet, but unharmed. I told myself it was just the adjustment. Divorce is hard on kids, I read. But then I started noticing changes, subtle ones. Lily's drawings, once full of color and sunshine, became muted, filled with grays and jagged lines. She started stuttering occasionally when she was nervous. She had night terrors, would wake up sobbing, whispering, "I didn't mean to," or "I'll be good." I asked her gently if something happened. Her eyes darted away. "Daddy gets mad sometimes," she finally said. "But only when I don't listen." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I lay awake, replaying every moment of my own silence over the years. How many times had I not listened? How many times had I made excuses for the way he treated me? And now it was bleeding into her. One Sunday evening, she returned from his house with a tiny red mark on her wrist. My heart dropped. "What happened?" I asked too sharply. She shrank a little. I was playing with the remote and Daddy grabbed me too hard. But it's okay, he said it was my fault. She smiled, genuinely, without bitterness, because she didn't know it wasn't supposed to be. I remember standing in the kitchen, my hands trembling as I poured her juice and thinking, this is how it starts again. Different house, different victim, same cycle. I wanted to report it. But how do you prove a man like Ethan is dangerous? There were no bruises, no police records, no screaming matches caught on tape. Just a little girl who still wanted to love her father, and a mother who'd already been labeled emotional more times than she could count. So I documented everything. I wrote down dates, times, words she used, tones she mimicked. I kept a folder of her drawings, photos of marks, even audio clips when I could. Not to weaponize, to protect, to be ready for the moment someone finally asked, why didn't you say something? And yet, as weeks passed, a different fear grew louder. What if no one ever asked? One night, after Lily fell asleep, curled up with her stuffed bunny, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her tiny face. She looked so peaceful, so trusting, and it hit me like a punch to the chest. She was braver than I had ever been. She wasn't shrinking, she was surviving, just like I did. Only this time, I couldn't afford to be a bystander in my own daughter's story. So I made a promise, right there in the half-light of that small bedroom. I don't care if no one believes me. I don't care if I look crazy. I will not let him take her voice, like he took mine. And as if in answer, Lily stirred in her sleep and mumbled, "Mama's safe." That was the moment I stopped surviving. That was the moment I started fighting. I filed the motion the next morning. The courthouse smelled like cold coffee and old paper, a place where lives are dissected with sterile efficiency. I sat alone on the worn bench outside the clerk's office, clutching a manila folder so tight my fingers turned white. Inside was everything I had: Lily's drawings, photographs of faint bruises, printouts of text messages, and my handwritten notes from every whisper and detail she ever confided. It felt pitiful, fragile, like trying to catch a hurricane in a teacup. But it was all I had. When I approached the window and asked for the form to request full custody, the woman behind the glass looked at me the way people often do, with a mix of sympathy and weariness, like she'd seen 100 versions of my story. I hated that I was just another tired mother trying to prove what should have been obvious. The paperwork took hours. I reviewed every word 5 times, my mind bouncing between legalese and the sound of Lily crying in her sleep. I knew this wasn't just a battle in court. It was a war of perception. I had to prove I wasn't bitter, wasn't exaggerating, wasn't an emotional woman lashing out after divorce. I had to be calm, rational, strategic. Ethan had already painted me as unstable in his counter-motion. His affidavit described me as paranoid, prone to episodes of irrationality. He referenced a time I forgot to return his call, a text I sent in frustration, a missed therapy appointment. To him, each detail became evidence. It wasn't just my fitness as a mother he was challenging. It was my sanity. Worse, he was charming in court. Always was. Showed up in a navy suit with just the right amount of sadness in his eyes. He'd shake hands with the bailiff, nod politely at the judge, and speak about Lily like he was the one nursing her through fevers, soothing her nightmares. Watching him lie so effortlessly was surreal. Like he'd convinced himself he was the victim. "I just want what's best for Lily," he'd say, his voice soft, controlled. "But I can't keep letting her be raised in an unstable environment. It breaks my heart." I wanted to scream, but instead, I sat in silence, my hands folded in my lap, trying not to look like the angry woman he warned them about. The judge, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and thinning hair, listened carefully. He asked questions, he reviewed the documents, but I could feel it, his uncertainty. I saw the flickers of doubt when Ethan talked about my history of emotional fragility. It was subtle. A raised brow, a shift in posture, but I knew that look. I'd spent years married to it. Lily became the centerpiece of the trial, though she was never in the room. Her name was repeated so often it started to lose weight. Lily's welfare, Lily's safety, Lily's development. But no one asked Lily anything. Not directly, not truly. Until one day, she asked me something. We were sitting at our tiny kitchen table, her feet dangling from the chair. She was coloring a picture of a sun with a face on it, something oddly cheerful for the storm we were in. She looked up at me and asked, Why do people think you're the scary one, Mama? I froze. What do you mean? Daddy says you make stuff up, she said casually, almost as if she was repeating a line from a movie. He said you cry too much, and that you want to keep me from him because you don't like losing. I couldn't breathe for a second. I reached across the table and took her small hand. Sweetheart, do you think I'm scary? She shook her head immediately. No, but I think Daddy's different when people are around. That sentence hung in the air like smoke. I didn't cry. Not in front of her. I nodded, kissed her forehead, and told her she was brave. That she was smart. That no matter what anyone said, she could always tell the truth. That night, I added that conversation to the log. And I made a decision. I would let her speak. Legally, it was complicated. Children that young aren't usually called to testify, but under special circumstances, they can provide a statement through a child advocate or in a private session with the judge. I fought for that. Relentlessly. My lawyer was hesitant. He warned me it could backfire. But I knew my daughter. I knew how much she held inside. And more than anything, I believed she deserved a voice. When the day came, Lily wore her favorite blue dress with white daisies. She held her stuffed bunny Bentley tightly as we walked into the courthouse. She wasn't scared, not in the way I expected. She was quiet, focused, her little fingers curling around mine with intention. The judge agreed to a private session. No lawyers, no parents, just him, the child advocate, and Lily. I had to let go of her hand at the door and watch her disappear into that big wooden room. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes, hours. My stomach twisted with every passing second. What if she froze? What if she forgot? What if Ethan had convinced her I was the bad guy? When the door opened, she walked out calmly. She didn't look shaken or confused, just a little tired. The judge didn't meet my eyes. He thanked her, gently, then motioned for her to go back to the waiting room. That afternoon, things shifted. Suddenly, the court started looking more closely at my evidence. They asked for additional documentation from Ethan. They subpoenaed texts. They requested logs from Lily's school counselor. It wasn't a slam dunk, but the air had changed. For the first time, someone was listening. Ethan, on the other hand, started to unravel. He got defensive, irritated, snapped during questioning. His carefully groomed persona cracked at the edges. The man who always knew what to say began contradicting himself. At one point, the judge asked him directly, "Do you believe your daughter is lying?" And Ethan stammered, "She's confused, not lying, but she doesn't always understand what's happening." And just like that, the mask slipped. The judge nodded slowly. He didn't comment, just made a note. I wasn't sure what the ruling would be. Courts rarely grant sole custody unless there's clear, demonstrable harm. But when that final day came, and I stood before the bench, hands clenched and breath held, I heard the words I had waited a year to hear. Full custody granted to the mother, pending periodic review. Supervised visitation rights to the father, effective immediately. I closed my eyes. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. When we walked out of the courthouse, Lily looked up at me and asked, "Can we go get pancakes?" I laughed. A real laugh, the kind that bubbles out before you realize it. I nodded and took her hand. As we crossed the street, she squeezed my fingers and whispered, "I told the truth, Mama, just like you said." And I whispered back, "I know, baby, and you saved us both." The days following the court ruling felt like waking up from a long, bruising nightmare. There was no confetti, no triumphant music, just quiet mornings where Lily's laughter returned. Hesitant at first, then bolder, like a bird testing its wings after a storm. I was still adjusting to the fact that I no longer had to hand her over to Ethan every other weekend. I didn't have to pretend anymore. I didn't have to smile through the ache of watching her walk away, wondering what stories she'd return with, what new doubts he might have planted in her head. But if I thought winning custody would bring peace, I was wrong. Ethan didn't disappear. He transformed. The man who once smiled in court and shook hands with judges now lurked on the edges of our lives. He showed up outside Lily's school once, just stood there, leaning against his car like he had every right in the world. He wasn't breaking any laws. Not technically. But when I saw him from across the parking lot, his arms crossed, sunglasses hiding whatever poison his eyes might have carried, I felt my stomach twist into knots. The school called security, and I filed a formal complaint. Still, the judge didn't revoke his visitation. only reinforced that it must remain supervised by a court-appointed counselor. Ethan was warned. Nothing more. That was the system. Always 2 steps behind danger until it became undeniable. Then came the emails. They started innocuously enough. Requests for updates, concerned inquiries about Lily's health or progress in school. But quickly, the tone changed. He accused me of turning Lily against him, of manipulating her to lie. He threatened to seek a reversal of the custody ruling. Claimed he had new evidence. My lawyer told me to ignore the messages and forward everything to her. So I did. But each time his name popped up on my screen, it felt like a ghost clawing at the edge of our new reality. Lily sensed it too. She didn't say much, but I could see it in the way she started locking her bedroom door at night, in the way she clutched Bentley, her stuffed bunny, tighter than before. She began to draw darker things, houses with no windows, stick figures with frowns. One night she asked me, if someone's sad and angry all the time, does that mean they're broken forever? I didn't know how to answer that. I just pulled her close and said, some people don't know how to fix themselves, sweetie. But that's not your job to do. She nodded against my chest, and I felt the weight of years she shouldn't have had to carry pressing down on her tiny shoulders. About 2 weeks after the final hearing, something happened that changed everything. It was a Sunday morning. Lily was playing with crayons on the living room rug while I folded laundry. The TV was humming softly in the background, some wildlife documentary she'd put on for background noise. I remember the moment so clearly because it was peaceful. The kind of normal I hadn't felt in years. Then she said, without looking up, do you want to see the video? I blinked. What video, honey? The one Daddy made, the one he showed me. He said it was just pretend, but I didn't like it. I put the laundry down. What kind of video? She crawled over to the couch, pulled her little pink tablet out of its case, and navigated to a hidden folder under her gallery. I didn't even know she knew how to create one. She clicked a file titled, Don't Watch. My heart began to hammer. When the video started playing, my hands went cold. It was Ethan's voice, his face. Filmed in what looked like his home office, the camera slightly askew, as though he hadn't realized it was recording. He was pacing back and forth, muttering under his breath. At first, it was nonsense, ramblings. But then he said something I'll never forget. They'll never take her from me. That kid's mine. I made her. I can undo her just as easy. I stopped breathing. My ears rang. In the video, he laughed, low and sharp, and then looked directly into the camera, eyes wild. If she wants war, she'll get it. I've already started planting the seed. Lily trusts me. She won't remember what's real and what's not. I paused the video and looked at my daughter. She looked back at me, eyes wide but steady. He said it was just a game. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I had to stay calm for her. I knelt down, took her face gently in my hands and said, you did the right thing, Lily. You were so brave to show me this. I forwarded the video to my lawyer within minutes. Within hours, a motion was filed for a restraining order. This time, the judge didn't hesitate. Ethan's visitation rights were suspended indefinitely. A full investigation was launched. But it wasn't over. It never truly was. Lily was called in for a second interview, this time with a forensic child psychologist. I sat outside the room, sipping lukewarm coffee, my fingers twitching. She was in there for over an hour. When she came out, she looked older, tired. She didn't want to talk much, just held my hand the whole way home. That night, I tucked her into bed with extra blankets, extra kisses. As I turned off the light, she whispered, did I make everything worse? No, baby, I whispered back, stroking her hair. You made everything safer. It was the truth. But even truth didn't always heal right away. She had nightmares for weeks. Woke up crying. Sometimes she'd whisper things in her sleep. Don't take Bentley. Don't tell Mommy. I didn't mean to lie. I sat beside her on those nights, rocking her gently, singing songs from when she was small. I told her stories about brave little girls and their mamas who fought dragons together, about secret places filled with safety and magic, where no one could hurt them. But inside, I was changing too. I had spent so many years surviving that I forgot what it meant to build something again. But I was learning, slowly, brick by brick, routine by routine. We painted the living room together. She picked the color, sky blue. We planted tulips in the front yard, though neither of us really knew how. We started a gratitude jar. Every night before bed, we'd write down one thing we were thankful for, fold it up, and drop it in. Sometimes she'd write things like, "Bentley's still soft," or "Pancakes didn't burn." One night she wrote, "Mommy didn't cry today." And I didn't. Not because I wasn't sad, but because hope was beginning to take root again. I knew the road ahead would still be rough. Ethan wasn't done. He'd appeal, threaten, send letters through his lawyer. But the difference now was, he no longer had access to our lives. And my daughter? She had a voice. One she'd found in the most terrifying of moments, and used with courage far beyond her years. That voice saved us. And I would spend the rest of my life making sure she never had to use it that way again. The summer came quietly that year, drifting in without fanfare. The air grew warmer, the daylight lingered longer, and the scent of freshly cut grass seemed to follow us home from every walk. On the outside, things appeared calm, almost normal. But under the surface, I was a mother on constant alert. And Lily, though she smiled more, still carried the weight of too much truth for a child her age. We were adjusting, healing in slow motion. But I knew better than to believe peace was permanent. Ethan hadn't faded away. He was like a storm that never truly passed, just moved further out to sea, waiting. After the restraining order and the psychologist's findings, I thought we'd be safe for a while. And we were. Until a single manila envelope arrived in the mail and cracked the illusion wide open again. I remember that afternoon vividly. I had just picked Lily up from her art camp, and she was humming some melody she'd made up as she colored on the kitchen table. I found the envelope stuck between a grocery flyer and an electricity bill. No return address, but it was postmarked from our county. Curious, I opened it. The contents hit like a fist to the gut. Inside was a printed letter from Ethan's new lawyer, a woman this time. Sharp, tactful, but carrying the same venom in her wording. She stated that Ethan was filing a motion to appeal the custody ruling, citing emotional manipulation of the minor and obstruction of parental rights. Attached were transcripts of text messages, old ones, doctored, and a list of witnesses he claimed would support his case, including one I hadn't heard from in years, Rachel. Rachel was my former best friend. She and I had fallen out after Ethan and I split. She said I was being too emotional, too dramatic. That Ethan had always been a little rough, but not dangerous. We hadn't spoken in over 2 years. Now her name appeared on a legal document alongside Ethan's. I felt sick. For a few moments, I just stood in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator loud in my ears, staring at the papers while Lily sang softly in the background, completely unaware. I called my lawyer immediately. She read through the letter in silence, and then sighed. "This is intimidation. He's trying to wear you down, make you panic. None of this will hold up, but we'll have to fight it. Again." I sat on the edge of my bed after hanging up, staring out the window as the sun began to lower. Lily came in and crawled onto my lap like she used to when she was little. "You look like you're thinking too loud," she said, resting her head on my shoulder. I smiled weakly. "Maybe I am." She hesitated, then whispered, "Is Daddy coming back?" I didn't lie. He's trying to. She didn't ask more, just held my hand and stayed there with me until the room turned gold from the setting sun. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, filings, and preparing for another round of legal battle. I was tired, so tired, but I couldn't afford to show it. Every day I packed Lily's lunch, helped her with homework, braided her hair, kissed her goodnight, then stayed up rereading every court document, every email, every transcript. I was preparing for war while trying to keep a garden blooming at home. And then Rachel called me. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity, or maybe just the need to confront, won out. Her voice was familiar and foreign at once. "Maya, I didn't know he'd put me down as a witness, I swear." I said nothing. "I told him I wouldn't get involved," she continued, her words tumbling over each other. "He twisted things I said. He said if I didn't testify for him, he'd drag me into some financial thing. I don't even know if it's real." My voice was colder than I meant it to be. "Why would you even talk to him?" "I thought maybe he'd changed," she said weakly. I was wrong. I let the silence hang before responding. "You need to put that in writing, a sworn affidavit. You say he pressured you, that he lied." She was quiet, then said, "I will. I'll send it tomorrow." True to her word, she did. And it helped, significantly. Her statement stripped one of Ethan's pillars of credibility, and my lawyer said it gave us more leverage. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt hollow. The day of the pre-hearing conference arrived like a thunderclap. It was held in a smaller courtroom this time, quieter, no jury, just the judge, the attorneys, and us. Ethan sat across from me in his tailored gray suit, clean-shaven, calm, like he always was when pretending to be someone he wasn't. He didn't look at me much, just occasionally glanced at Lily, who sat in the back with a child advocate. She looked so small in that big chair, her sneakers swinging just above the floor. The judge asked routine questions, reviewed preliminary filings, and then gave Ethan's attorney the floor. The woman stood with a straight back and started listing reasons for reconsideration. I felt each word like sandpaper against skin: alienation, unfounded fear, coached testimony. When she mentioned the video, she claimed it was taken out of context. That was when my attorney stood. She didn't raise her voice, didn't flash theatrics. She just laid out the truth, methodical, factual, irrefutable. Then she handed over Rachel's affidavit and a fresh report from Lily's counselor stating that contact with Ethan triggered emotional dysregulation consistent with trauma response. The judge nodded slowly, taking notes. Then he asked Ethan if he had anything to say. Ethan stood and said, "I love my daughter. I just want to be part of her life." It was a performance, hollow and polished. The judge studied him a long time. Then he said, "Mr. Blackwood, love is not just about presence, it's about protection. And based on what I've read, your presence has caused significant distress to your daughter." The motion was denied. There was no applause, no dramatic outburst, just the sound of a gavel and the quiet shuffling of papers. But as I turned to look at Lily and saw her smile, small but real, I felt something shift inside me. Not just relief, something deeper, like I'd finally reached the shore after treading water for years. We walked out of that courtroom hand in hand. The sunlight felt different on our skin, warmer, like maybe this time the storm really was behind us. Maybe. It was late September when the school called. The kind of call no parent ever wants to receive, not because something bad had happened, but because something was happening beneath the surface, and no one could quite name it yet. Lily's teacher, Miss Conway, had a soft voice that trembled a little when she said, "I think it might be best if we talked in person." I drove over immediately. The school was quiet, with that autumn hush in the air, leaves crunching underfoot, a breeze rustling through the playground where laughter should have been. Inside the classroom, Lily's desk sat neat and untouched. Her drawing of a tree with purple leaves still taped to the window. Miss Conway met me with kind eyes and folded hands. "Lily's been doing well academically," she said gently. "But she's been distant. She flinches when someone raises their voice, even in excitement. She doesn't like group activities anymore. And today, during art, she drew this." She slid a piece of paper across the desk. My heart twisted. It was a crayon drawing of a girl standing on one side of a glass wall. On the other side was a man, his face darkened with scribbled black lines. Between them was a small heart, cracked in the middle. In the corner, Lily had written one word in shaky letters: "Safe?" I looked up at Miss Conway, throat tight. "We've been through a lot." "I understand," she said. "I'm not trying to raise alarms. I just think she may need a different kind of support." That evening, after Lily fell asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked tightly under her chin, I sat on the floor by her bed and stared out the window into the night. There were stars above our small house, stars that looked the same every night, but I felt worlds away from where I'd started. I didn't want my daughter to grow up thinking fear was normal, that silence was safety. I wanted her to reclaim her laughter, her wild imagination, her sense of belonging in a world that didn't whisper danger behind every closed door. The next morning, I called a child trauma therapist who specialized in domestic recovery. Her name was Dr. Morrison, and just over the phone, her voice carried a calm that felt like a weighted blanket. She listened without interrupting and asked thoughtful questions about Lily, her habits, her drawings, her sleep. "She's not broken," Dr. Morrison said gently, "but she's still building her map of the world. And right now her map says, danger can happen anytime, from people you love." That hit me in a place I didn't know was still raw. The first session was scheduled for a Saturday. I told Lily she was going to meet someone who helped kids talk through their big feelings. She was hesitant, clutching her backpack like a shield, but agreed. The therapy room was nothing like a doctor's office. It had soft rugs, big windows, shelves of books and puppets, and beanbags shaped like animals. Dr. Morrison met Lily on the floor, sitting cross-legged, offering a box of colorful clay and no pressure. I watched from behind a one-way mirror as Lily eventually began to talk, not in long sentences, but through her hands. She sculpted shapes and stories. A fox who hid under the bed from a roaring bear. A bird who built a nest so high in the tree no one could reach her. Dr. Morrison nodded, asked open questions, mirrored Lily's stories with her own quiet metaphors. Week by week, Lily softened. Her drawings changed. The people in them had faces again. Sometimes she'd hum while coloring, like she used to. I didn't press her for details after each session. I just listened when she offered a story or made a joke at dinner. Healing, I was learning, didn't come with announcements. It came in sighs, in giggles, in her sleeping through the night without nightmares. But one night, weeks into the process, Lily came into my room holding her tablet. "Can I show you something?" She sat beside me on the bed and tapped play on a video she'd recorded herself. I expected something silly, a song, maybe, but what came next hollowed me. In the video, she looked directly at the camera. Her voice was quiet but steady. "This is for the judge. My name is Lily. I'm 7 years old. I want to live with my mom. She makes me feel safe. My dad, sometimes he scared me. He yelled at me. He made me hide things. But my mom didn't. She listens. She believes me." I watched, barely breathing, as she continued. "Sometimes I think about when he said I was lying. That made me feel invisible. But I'm not. I remember everything, and I want someone to hear me." She ended the video with a small wave, like she didn't quite know how to say goodbye. I looked at her, stunned. "Lily, why did you make this?" She shrugged. "In case he comes back again, I want them to know I'm not lying." I wrapped my arms around her so tight I thought I might never let go. "You are so brave," I whispered into her hair. So brave." The next day, I sent the video to my lawyer. She called back, her voice low with disbelief. That may be one of the most powerful pieces of testimony I've ever seen. A few weeks later, when the final custody review came due, the judge didn't hesitate. The video wasn't played in open court. It didn't have to be. It had already been reviewed and accepted as part of the sealed evidence. The ruling was made permanent. Ethan was granted no visitation, supervised or otherwise, for the foreseeable future. He didn't contest it. Maybe he'd finally realized he couldn't rewrite the truth. Afterward, Lily and I went for ice cream. She ordered mint chocolate chip and sat cross-legged on the booth bench like a queen on her throne. I asked her how she felt. "Like the fox finally came out from under the bed," she said simply, licking her spoon. I laughed through the tears I didn't bother to hide. She didn't ask why I was crying. I think she knew. That night, I tucked her in and kissed her forehead. "Thank you for being strong," I whispered. She smiled. "You taught me how." And in that quiet moment, with her room filled with moonlight and the soft sound of her breathing, I realized we weren't just surviving anymore. We were rebuilding. Not just a life, but a legacy. One made not of fear, but of fierce, unshakable love. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in the way institutions of power often feel, clinical, impersonal, indifferent to the emotions it contains. I sat on the left side, close to the front, clutching a folder with every legal document I'd ever had to gather to defend my right to protect my own daughter. Ethan sat on the opposite bench, immaculate in a tailored navy suit, his jaw tight, his smirk ever present. He was the picture of composure, even after everything that had come to light. Or perhaps that's exactly why he looked so smug. He truly believed charm would still win. The judge, a stern woman with streaks of silver in her tightly bound hair, read through the paperwork with little expression. I had been told not to expect drama. "Custody hearings are procedural," my lawyer had said. "Facts, not feelings." But how could I separate the two, when every line of ink in that file represented a moment Lily and I fought to survive? Ethan's attorney, a young man with slicked back hair and a tone of polite condescension, stood first. "Your Honor, my client has expressed ongoing concern regarding Miss Jensen's emotional stability and its impact on the minor child's well-being. He seeks full custody, with the option to restrict unsupervised access until a psychological evaluation can be completed." I didn't react, not visibly. I'd learned not to. But inside I could feel my pulse spike. Emotional instability. The phrase echoed like a taunt in my chest. It didn't matter how many therapy appointments Lily attended, how much progress we'd made, or how many nights I stayed awake monitoring her breathing after a nightmare. To them, I was still the ex-wife, still the woman they assumed could be manipulated into silence. Then it was our turn. My lawyer, a seasoned woman named Tessa, with a quiet steel in her posture, rose and placed a tablet on the desk. Your Honor, we have a piece of testimony we'd like to enter into evidence. It is a personal video made voluntarily by the minor child, Lily Jensen, age 7. The content was not solicited by the parent or therapist, but submitted of her own will. We believe it speaks to the heart of this case. The judge raised an eyebrow. Has the opposing counsel reviewed this? We provided the video with our last evidence packet, Tessa said calmly, time-stamped and verified. Ethan's lawyer opened his mouth, likely to object, but the judge waved a hand. Let's proceed, she said. I'll view the video now. The court clerk connected the tablet to the screen. For a moment, the courtroom fell into total silence, and then Lily appeared. She wore her favorite yellow sweater, the one with the butterfly sewn on the front. Her hair was a little messy, her bangs slightly crooked from when she insisted on trimming them herself. But her voice, God, her voice was steady and heartbreakingly clear. My name is Lily. I'm 7. I want to live with my mom because she makes me feel safe. Her hands were folded in her lap. My dad used to yell, a lot. He scared me sometimes, not just loud scary, but quiet scary. Like when he said if I told I'd make everything worse. He said people wouldn't believe me, that I'd get my mom in trouble. A sharp breath moved through the courtroom. Ethan's jaw tightened. But my mom believed me, Lily continued, even when I didn't have the right words. She helped me find them. I have nightmares sometimes, but she's always there. Even if it's 2 a.m., she never gets mad. There was a long pause. In the video, Lily glanced off screen, then looked back. I don't want to live with someone who makes me afraid. I don't want to pretend nothing happened. Please believe me. I remember. The video ended, silence. The judge leaned back slightly, her eyes heavy. No theatrics, just the weight of truth settling over everyone in the room. I've seen enough, she said quietly. Ethan started to rise, perhaps to speak, but the judge held up a hand again. Mr. Foster, I've reviewed months of reports from the child's school, her therapist, medical records, and now this video. Your request for full custody is not only denied, but I am suspending your visitation privileges indefinitely. If you wish to revisit this issue in the future, you may file a petition after completing a certified anger management and parenting course. Until then, no contact with the child will be permitted. The words hit like thunder. For the first time, I saw Ethan truly falter. His face didn't break, but his posture did. He slumped slightly in his seat, his fingers tightening on the table edge. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply exhaled a breath I'd been holding for 2 years. Outside the courtroom, Tessa turned to me. You did it. No, I said, eyes misting. Lily did. That night, I told her the judge had made the decision. It's just going to be you and me now, I said gently. Lily blinked. Forever? I nodded. Yes, unless one day you choose something different when you're older. But for now, this is our safe place. She paused. Even if I have bad dreams again? I'll still be there, I said. Every single time. She smiled, and something in her shoulders relaxed. That was the night she didn't ask to sleep in my bed. She curled up in her own, rabbit tucked beside her, and whispered, "Good night, Mama." For the first time in months, I felt like the ground beneath us wasn't shifting anymore. We weren't looking over our shoulders. We weren't waiting for another hearing, another accusation, another crack in the foundation of our home. We were finally, undeniably, safe. And that kind of peace, it's not loud. It doesn't come with applause or balloons. It's quiet and soft, like a child steady breathing through the night. But it's everything. Life didn't return to normal overnight, but it began to settle into something new, something tender, something real. In the weeks that followed the court ruling, Lily and I rebuilt our routines piece by piece. There were still moments when she'd flinch at sudden loud noises or freeze if a stranger raised their voice in the grocery store. But she always looked to me, and I was there. I always would be. Each day we added small joys to our lives. We started having pancake Saturdays, where she'd stir the batter with exaggerated importance, and I'd sneak blueberries into the mix while her back was turned just to make her giggle. She painted her room bright coral, insisted on glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and asked to adopt a cat. We named her Junebug. It was Lily's idea. "Because she's tiny but brave," she said. One morning, while packing her lunch, I found a folded note in my purse in crayon. "Thank you for being my safe." I stood at the sink and cried, not with sorrow, but with something deeper, more sacred: gratitude. For the first time in a long while, I was no longer trying to survive, I was living. But peace, as I learned, is not always permanent. Sometimes ghosts from the past don't knock, they just show up. It happened on a windy Thursday afternoon. I was standing in the school's pickup line, clutching Lily's pink jacket, when I saw Ethan's car parked across the street. My stomach tightened, old fear clawing its way up despite everything. He hadn't contacted us since the court ruling. No calls, no letters, no petitions. He was supposed to disappear. He didn't get out, just sat there, sunglasses on, engine running. I rushed Lily into the car the second she stepped out of the school gate. "Was that Daddy's car?" she asked softly, glancing behind us as we pulled away. I didn't lie. "I think so." "Why?" "I don't know yet." That night I called Tessa. She was calm but firm. "Legally, he has no grounds for contact. But keep records. Every time. Every sighting. If it continues, we'll file a restraining order." The next few days were quiet again, like the eye of a storm pretending to be sunshine. But the tension settled into my shoulders. I started double-checking the locks, taking alternate routes home, sleeping less. Then, one evening, Lily and I were walking Junebug through the neighborhood. It was dusk. The street lamps had just flickered on, and the sky glowed lavender. Lily was singing to herself, a silly made-up tune about moonbeams and jelly beans, when a figure stepped out from behind a parked van. Ethan. He looked older, more hollow than the man who once smiled through courtroom lies. But his presence was no less threatening. His eyes locked on mine. "Claire," he said, voice too soft to be safe. I stepped in front of Lily instinctively. "You're not supposed to be here." "I just wanted to see her," he said, hands out like peace meant anything anymore. "Just to know she's okay." "She's not yours to see," I snapped, heat rising in my throat. "You gave that up. You don't get to show up uninvited and pretend you care." Lily clutched my hand tighter, shrinking behind my coat. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, eyes flicking toward her. "I messed up, I know that. I was angry and stupid, and I lost everything. I lost her. I just want a chance." "No," I said, cutting him off. "You don't get a chance. Not with her. Not now. Not ever." He looked at me for a long time, something desperate and dangerous shifting behind his eyes. "You think you can keep me away forever?" I didn't respond. I turned and walked away, fast but steady, heart pounding so hard I could barely hear Lily's tiny footsteps beside mine. That night, I filed a police report. The restraining order was granted the next day. I told Lily the truth, as gently as I could, that sometimes people we used to love make choices that mean we can't be near them anymore, not because we don't care, but because caring also means protecting. She nodded slowly, understanding far too much for someone so young. "Will he come again?" she whispered. "I won't let him," I said, kissing her forehead. "I promise." We added new routines, a security system, a neighborhood watch check-in. Her school was informed, her teachers alert, and slowly the tension in my chest began to ease again. Weeks passed, then months, and something beautiful happened. Lily began to thrive. She made her first best friend, a boy named Owen, who shared his fruit snacks and drew dragons with glitter crayons. She started sleeping through the night. She began writing stories in a little spiral notebook she carried everywhere, mostly about a girl and her magical cat who saved the world with a rainbow shield. She laughed more. Laughed like sunlight. And me? I started drawing again, something I hadn't done in years. On weekends, I'd sit at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee, sketching Junebug sprawled on the windowsill or Lily dancing in the garden. My heart didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like home. Then, one ordinary Saturday, Lily looked up from her coloring book and said, "Mama, do you think people who hurt others can ever really change?" I paused, not sure how to answer. "Maybe," I said eventually, "if they really try, if they're honest, and if they stop hurting people first." She nodded thoughtfully, then returned to her drawing. I realized then that she wasn't asking for Ethan's sake. She was asking for her own. To understand the world. To find hope, even in the shadows. That night I watched her sleep, hair fanned across the pillow, breathing steady and soft. And I understood something I hadn't before. We weren't just survivors anymore. We were healers. We were builders of new life. And no ghost from the past could take that away. Not anymore. Spring arrived like a gentle breath, soft, floral, and full of quiet promises. The cherry blossoms outside our home bloomed in delicate pink, and the breeze no longer whispered danger but sang of healing. Life had settled into something strong, something sacred. Lily was thriving in second grade now. Her latest obsession was space, planets, black holes, galaxies. She told me, one morning over oatmeal, that she wanted to be an astronaut so she could find places where no bad things ever happened. I told her she didn't need to leave Earth to find peace. We were building it right here. But peace isn't the absence of memory. It's learning how to carry those memories without letting them sink you. One late afternoon, while sorting boxes in the attic, I came across a folder tucked behind a stack of holiday decorations. Inside were pictures, old ones of Ethan and me before everything collapsed. Smiling, arms around each other, fake joy captured in still frames. There was one photo I hadn't seen in years, Ethan holding Lily as a newborn, his eyes bright and full of something I barely remembered, tenderness. I stared at it for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not longing, just understanding. I had spent so long hating him, fearing him, really, that I had forgotten that hate was still a form of attachment. I didn't want to be bound to him anymore, not even through bitterness. That day I decided to let go, not to forget, but to release the power those memories held over me. I placed the folder in a bin marked past, shut the lid, and carried it to the bottom of the attic stairs. I didn't throw it away. But I didn't need it to stay close either. That evening, as the sun dipped low and bathed the living room in gold, Lily curled up next to me with her favorite blanket and said, "Do you think Daddy ever thinks about me?" It was a question that would have once made my chest tighten, but now I took a deep breath and answered calmly, "I think maybe he does, in his own way." "Do you think he's sorry?" I looked at her, so open, so impossibly strong. "Maybe. But even if he is, that doesn't mean we need him. We've got everything we need right here, don't we?" She nodded slowly and leaned her head on my shoulder. "You're enough, Mama. You're everything." I didn't cry then, though my throat burned. I just held her tighter. As summer approached, something unexpected happened. I received a letter in the mail, no return address. It was from Ethan. The envelope was plain, the handwriting familiar but shakier. Inside was a single page. No threats, no demands, just an apology. Not for the court battle, not for trying to steal custody, but for everything else. The manipulation, the lies, the way he'd treated Lily as a weapon instead of a child. He admitted he had checked himself into therapy a year ago, that he hadn't seen his own brokenness until the courtroom silence had forced him to, and that he wouldn't ask for contact. He only wanted me to know that he was trying to be better, not for us, but for himself. I sat with the letter for a long time. Lily was out in the yard with Junebug, giggling, chasing butterflies with a net too small and too hopeful. I thought about what healing really meant, not erasing what happened, but growing anyway. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. But for the first time, I felt something close to peace when I thought of him. I didn't forgive him, but I didn't wish him harm either. Lily's birthday came in July. She wanted a moon-themed party. We hung planets from the ceiling, played space trivia, and baked a crater cake. She wore a silver crown and announced to everyone, "This is the best birthday in the galaxy." After the party, when the house was quiet and full of crumpled wrapping paper and laughter echoes, she came to me, face serious. "Mama? Yeah, honey? Do you think I'm safe forever now?" I pulled her onto my lap. She was getting bigger, legs spilling over the sides like tree branches growing too fast. "I think you're safer now than you've ever been, and no matter what happens, I will always, always protect you." She nodded, but didn't speak, just hugged me tight and rested her cheek against my chest. That night, as I watched her sleep, her face soft and peaceful, arms wrapped around her stuffed astronaut, I realized something. We had done it. We had made it through the fire, not without scars, not without pain, but we had survived. We had rebuilt, and more than that, we had become something new. I had become more than just a survivor. I was a mother forged in battle, a protector shaped by storms. And Lily, my brave, bright girl, she was more than a child caught in a custody war. She was a phoenix, born from ashes, ready to soar. People often think strength looks like muscles or shouting or winning courtrooms. But I've learned it's quieter than that. It's making pancakes on mornings when your heart still trembles. It's holding a child through nightmares and whispering truths even when they're hard. It's letting go of anger so it doesn't poison the future. The world hadn't changed. There would still be cruelty, injustice, men like Ethan. But we had changed. And that was enough. As autumn neared, I started writing again. Real writing. Not just journal entries and grocery lists, but stories. About resilience, about healing, about mothers and daughters who survived impossible things. Lily read every page. Sometimes she'd offer notes. Add more stars, she'd say. Or make the mom braver. And I would. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We write new endings, we choose different beginnings, we build the life we deserve. And sometimes, when we're lucky, we get to share that story with someone who needed it just as much. Like maybe you. If you're reading this, I hope you know, it's never too late to stand up, to speak the truth, to protect the ones you love. Even when your voice shakes. Even when the world doubts you. Because one voice, one little girl, one brave step, it can change everything. Just like it did for us. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. If you've made it this far, your heart must be as strong and compassionate as Claire's. This story reminds us that even in the darkest moments, when we feel unheard, unloved, or defeated, there is still power in truth, resilience in love, and hope in the quiet strength of a mother fighting for her child. Life will test us, people may try to silence us, but in the end, integrity, courage, and love always find their voice. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you of your own strength, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another powerful story like this. Your support helps us share more voices that deserve to be heard. See you in the next video. Stay strong, stay kind, and stay true.